Hello there, welcome to a Second Thoughts overview of Kroq-Gar of the Lizardmen. Now I played through the initial turns and checked the victory conditions, starting location, buildings, etc. And I have a grasp of how the faction plays out. These are my conclusions, and in the end I'll show you some army compositions that I would like to try out. Like always, a disclaimer, this is not an in-depth guide, but we'll have elements of it. Basically what I would do before starting up a campaign. It should help you out to enjoy the faction. Now let's go play with Kroq-Gar of the Lizardmen. So for your short victory condition, you need to destroy several factions. Clan Morbidos, located here, Clan Mordkin to the north, the Silver Host a little bit more to the north, the Drakenhof Conclave across the mountains, and the Leafcutters Tribe also across the mountains. These are pretty close by as well. Still, even though it's kind of like this whole area here, I would say this is short to complex, because of course the more that you expand, the more you'll find other enemies, so it may be an average campaign overall. You still need to occupy, loot, raise, or sack 30 different settlements, so yeah, it's gonna take a while. The reward is +3 hero capacity for all heroes, really good so that you don't need too many buildings, which is excellent with the Lizardmen, trust me, but also to have some scouts around easily. Now, long campaign, it's pretty long. Requires the short victory, occupy, loot, raise, or sack 70 different settlements, and then to destroy, well, the same faction that you already had to destroy, the Drakenhof Conclave, the Exiles of Khorne, so you have to go against Khorne, Clan Moors, located across the mountains, the Bloody Hands, even further down, the Harbinger of Disaster, Boxmakers of Nurgle, which is in these lands, and then the Oracles of Tzeentch. So you have to defeat 3 of the Monogod factions. That alone is quite a problem. And then, not only this would already be a long campaign. I would forgo this, but still, you need to ensure that you have all these provinces, or at least 5 of these. The Golden Pass, the Central Jungles, the Western Jungles, pretty sure these will become yours. The Southern Jungles, the Jungles of the Gods. Yeah, these are probably the most easy ones, but then they advise you to also get the Kingdom of Beasts and the Dragon Isles. You have to go there to defeat Nurgle, so why not control those? Of course, if Nurgle is defeated, then you forgo that. Still, quite a long victory. Then you get a +10 hero recruit rank. It helps ensure that, of course, your heroes are all good when they pop up. This also goes with the specific buff that you'll see, which is that Kroq-Gar is, of course, the last defender of Shuttle. He benefits from upkeep reduction for any armies led by Saurus Old Bloods. Saurus buildings grant some additional bonuses to Scar Veterans and Saurus Old Bloods. Weapon strength +1% per character rank, so maximum 50% weapon strength for Saurus Scar Veterans and Saurus Old Bloods. And experience gained for, again, the same Saurus heroes and Saurus. If you didn't catch the idea that they really want you to experience and to use Saurus heroes and lords, get to it. So yeah, it's basically that's the premise from The Last Defenders. Just abuse those heroes, they'll have crazy good weapon strength, so yeah. In terms of climate, there lies the biggest problem typically with Lizardmen, actually, most Lizardmen. So you do have some good area here with jungle and stuff to benefit, but soon rather enough you'll have unpleasant climate and uninhabitable. You still have to defeat Tzeentch in these area, so yeah, it's average to bad, honestly. Apart from those nearby jungles, nearly everything to the north is unpleasant or uninhabitable. So yeah, not the best faction to go for domination. It's a difficult one to go for domination. Probably a fun one though, but still be wary of that. Do note, as always, the climate over here. You can see that the main issue that I like to recommend is because of the casualty replenishment rate and the income. So uninhabitable places will never be as good for you as any others. Of course, they're not useless, but yeah, you may have some issues, especially when trying to conquer those places with the replenishment rate. Your starting province is in the middle of the road. It is a 2-settlement province, which you start in a minus settlement, actually. So there are no 4-settlement provinces nearby, especially at least not in the vicinity, so it may prove difficult for you to have a nice solid recruitment location. It is quite defensible though. You may enjoy the benefits of being both near the sea but not directly into it, and of course you can always benefit from, you know, just putting a stance here. Golden Tower will be defensible and you can just control this whole area across the mountains. Yeah, that should be an idea. Of course, in terms of typical expansion, either go north or go south. It will depend on which allies you gain, which enemies you find, but yeah, either north or south is all good. I wouldn't recommend too much going into the middle right away, but of course it's always something that you can do. Of course, this is mainly because of you trying to avoid, you know, the unpleasant climates that lie over there. So diplomatically, you're still kinda part of the Ordertide. At least they'll be your most likely allies. You can see the aversion here is quite low. So yeah, High Elves, the Wood Elves, you know, High Elves here with Teclis. Let me get a quick deal that you can see. So yeah, Teclis will immediately go for or will be able to give you some trade. So Teclis, the Wood Elves nearby, are Thoric with Iron Bros Expedition here. They are most likely going to be your allies if they can survive, or for either of them if they can survive. They'll provide you with the outposts that you may want. If you manage, of course, any of them, trying to get any missile units, any artillery from the dwarves, that always will be really good for you, for your armies, and will benefit you greatly. Typical enemies. You have a lot of them, so you're going to start with a lot of Skaven, vampire counts, then into all the monogods, so you won't be lacking any enemies, that's for certain. And of course, benefiting from these outposts, you may have already the wonderful compositions to destroy them. So in terms of mechanics, we do have Lord Kroq. He's just insane. A nice hero to have on any army. You get a quest while you're playing your campaign, basically. It will just immediately spawn up. And you'll get a quest to save him. And once you do, he's just a beast of a hero. You'll have him in any basic Lord army and he can shine on his own, or you can definitely join him with Kroq-Gar for a powerful combo. Rights are fairly decent, although some are quite costly. 12,000, 6,000, this is difficult. Now, the Primeval Glory one gives you an army of pretty much dinosaurs. That is really expensive. Be mindful of the upkeep, alright? And it also gives you an army ability, the Feral Cold Ones. This is great. Having summons with the Lizardmen is really amazing. So, just with this, it would be a nice one. Of course, not with that cost, but the extra army always helps. Now, the Rite of Sotek causes attrition to enemy armies within your territory and increases your ambush success chance to nearly, well, you'll always be able to ambush pretty much. Of course, it's also useful for all armies that have skink units and some of the ones that have pterodon units, so that may be the case while you are performing this rite, of course. Definitely worth the money in most cases. Now, Rite of Ferocity is your bread and butter. You know, unit experience gain per turn, income from post-battle loot, recruits rank, local recruitment capacity. Nothing out of the ordinary here, but still, it's rather inexpensive. Do it as soon as you can, of course, and especially whenever you're recruiting units for an army. Finally, the Rite of Awakening. You should do this every time that you can, of course, because the cooldown duration, of course, is the only thing that matters. It's a good way to get a caster lord, and these are very effective, and especially they do have different lores of magic that you do not have. So yeah, be mindful of that. In terms of another mechanic is the Blessed Spawnings. I do not have access to them here, but you can see this. These are just different versions of your units, of course, you know, very upgraded versions of your units. So they're giving, after specific missions, basically you'll just be playing the game, and you'll get missions, and though the reward will be often in the form of some blessed units, of course. And they are great, especially because it's another pool for instant recruitment. You know, similar to how the Regiments of Renown pool works, you'll have the blessed spawnings and you can recruit them instantly, which is great. Anything that you can recruit instantly is really cool. Finally, we have the Geomantic Web. This is a sort of small soft bonus as well. It gives some bonuses to the edicts of a province. It does not really require anything else other than you increasing this building. Let me show you here, which is the Geomantic Pylon. Of course, if you have everyone around you with level 5, then of course this level 5 building, then of course it will increase the overall geomantic web strength, and of course if you have them with people nearby as being allies to you, it also increases. But other than that, it just costs you a building slot, which is a big of a problem for the Lizardmen. That's a bit of an issue. They do require so many buildings, and they sometimes don't have enough slots for all of them. So yeah, if anything that I would change on Lizardmen is actually the amount of slots that they get, or the less dependency, you know, or reform of the geomantic web, so that it doesn't rely on a building, for instance. So in terms of province edicts, you have a recruit cost and recruit rank and leadership and weapon strength for armies in the province. You also have a control chance of lesser chance of plague spreading, plague duration as well, enemy hero reaction chance, basically something defensive. Some minus attrition when under siege and corruption, and also an army ability. And you do have the research rate. I love this one. Construction time -1 for all buildings, which is always nice. And chance of winds of magic province-wide as well, growing. And finally, you have a growth and income from all buildings. All of these are quite nice. It has a quite different approach. I like how it has both growth and research, actually, which are really good. I really love those. And as well as the typical income and control, but with different effects. Now, these are of course enhanced by the geomantic web, which implies that they can reach as far as this, as you can see there, even global recruitment capacity faction wide. Notice that one. Or for instance, for this, which lots of control, less of a chance of a plague. It's always optimal when fighting, you know, someone that produces plagues, of course. Then research rate plus 10%, can you imagine? Just having like 5 or 7 provinces like that. And more growth, more income from buildings, and always the diplomatic relations with Lizardmen. Apologies. So, one other thing is the army stances. These are quite different. So, Astromancy has Vanguard for some units, ambush defense chance, and campaign line of sight, chance of intercepting an army. So basically, you take 25% of your movement, and you're better defensible. So this is excellent when fighting Skaven, for instance, so be wary of that. Now, channeling also gives winds of magic and costs the typical 10% move. Encamp costs 50%, immune to attrition, enables replenishment and access to the global recruitment pool, the typical ones. You also have ambush with 35% and forced march, of course. So those are the ones that you have. Notice the lack of a raid stance, so you're more of a defensive guy, basically. So yeah. That's the sort of idea that we have here with the province edicts and army stances. In terms of buildings, the Golden Tower, your starting settlement, has a great income control research rate, note, and corruption building. It's really cool. It's on tier 2, so yeah, that also is great. Teotihuacan doesn't have anything special, by the way, so yeah, be mindful of that. Now, you need 8 buildings for full military, ouch, including the army that is necessary for some units. Only 3 of these can be built to the full in minor settlements, though. Now, the Star Chamber and the Scrying Pool, as well as the Geomantic Pylon, basically the Geomantic Web building, are all buildings, of course, that you need to have. So there's so many buildings to choose from. Careful planning is required. Make sure that you only build the buildings that you will need for those specific army compositions. Plan out the specific army compositions from the start, because if not, you may get overwhelmed with so many options. I would join up some of these options if I were CA. So In terms of infrastructure, you have growth and replenishment, you have income generated, you have control, and of course the geometric web, which is also provide income from all buildings. You have to consider that the Star Chamber can only be built, it's advanced military, so it can only be built in a capital settlement, and it acts kind of like an infrastructure, gives you some hero recruit ranks and maturation, some recruit ranks, some income from all buildings, etc. You also have the scrying pool, which you can also build in minor ones, but it unlocks technologies, of course, most of these buildings do. It does give you research rate, which is excellent and very important, and of course some defensive buffs overall. Now, in terms of the research, let's talk about it. Research is really good, actually. It gives you campaign and other buffs that are really important, but it costs a lot of time. To maximize all this, you'll need a lot of time, really. But it's really great because, you know, one line focuses on the specific units, and another one will focus on another line type of units. Then another one is more for industry or for construction or for trade or income, as you can see here. So yeah, all of them are really important. Just make sure that you unlock as soon as possible with the buildings so that you can benefit from these ones, of course, as soon as possible. So as always, you have your lord or specific skills, the yellow line, the red line or army line, basically, or the blue line or campaign. In the case of the Lizardmen, you also have these specific ones with the blessings that can improve your army, some campaign action as well, so be wary of those. You'll have to only select one at level 10, so yeah, nothing too fancy here, just a small mechanic basically. The red line has very good choices, rather cheap, but you basically go into either skink units or Saurus units. So these are for the skink units and these are for Saurus units basically. Dinosaurs are nearly all based on one skill set. Of course you do have Hunt Leader for Feral Carnosaurs and Dreadsaurians, but for the most part you will have them here, which is excellent. It's definitely a must for most armies, but you can use other options too. In terms of the blue line, it does have the upkeep reduction and the replenishment rate, although it may be costly for it being here for your dinosaur armies, you know. A special note to heroes, which is that, let me show you here, that you do have a very the Skink Shift, the very first one that you can get, does provide replenishment for troops, which is excellent, by the way. And then you have the Saurus Scar Veterans. Remember that for this faction specifically, these are a mainstay. And then you also have the typical casters, with also the Oracle, the Skink Oracle option, which is really awesome. All of them are quite useful and their mount options are really good, so be wary of that. Although, note, like I was saying here, only the Skink Shift actually provides replenishment, which you may have to use because of the overall climate. Now, every lord itself has specific bonuses for, and basically it's for the typical units that they are. So for instance, Kroq-Gar Ancients will have buffs for Kroq-Gars. Red Crested Skink Chiefs will have buffs for, guess what? Skinks. So ensure that you can get a lot of different army compositions if you focus on them, but nothing wrong with having a red crested skink chief with just dinosaurs if you wish. It's all up to you. Now, magic is also very important for, and they have a good array of lores, but this is especially true with the Slan mages. So of course, when you have the mage priestess with the Rite of Awakening, be sure that you get the lores of magic that you traditionally cannot get with just your skink priests, for instance. So here are the red line skills for the Lizardmen. They have quite a lot of mixed units, so you can have different compositions and buff every unit in that comp easily. As you can see there. For the most part, I either like to have a rush army or a more defensive army with some missiles there. Now, Kroq-Gar in specific has a lot of buffs versus specific enemies. What you should do is, if you're going to fight Vampire Counts, Vampire Coasts, and Tomb Kings, by all means get the Obliterate the Undead. And then your army will always be really good against those, you know? So that's the sort of idea that you should have. Even low-tier units can perform well into the late game, but nothing wrong with upgrading these later on, you know? Note how little redline skills are required. All that I've done here is just a specific army composition with Saurus units, some cavalry. This is more of an early game army, and then upgraded to dinosaurs, of course. But by all means, you can try to use this late game as Kroq-Gar himself, and with these buffs, it's really a cool dude, let's say. You know, he'll make sure that this army can proceed adequately, you know. Now, in all essence, so Saurus Old Bloods may have the most typical composition that I kind of like to have, which is some Temple Guard with Kroq-Gars for damage dealing, some missiles and dinosaurs. In this case, I'm taking advantage of these units being all in the same red line skill line, so that's one. That's why it's so average in terms of the costly, actually cheap in terms of cost of red line skills. And then these ones just for fun, just some dinos, good old dinos never fail you. This would be a Saurus with some missile units, and just to use those Carnosaurs and the Dreadsaurians. Of course, be mindful that you'll take a long time to get even 2 Dreadsaurians, so yeah, just be wary of that. Now, however, there's nothing wrong with you even using some skink chiefs and some basic skink unit armies. These are rather cheap as well, so I kind of use them as sweeper armies, like I've mentioned many times before. And finally, to note that you can either have this or you can have this, so be mindful of those. With always having this, so be mindful of that. Now, with Lord Kroq, you can give him anything, by the way, but this is just an idea that you may have. Of course, some Saurus units, some flying units, basically some range. Either you get these ones, or you get some chameleon skinks, or you get the flyings. It's up to you. Now, just some nice combinations with warriors, you know, with some flying units, some dinosaurs. Notice how average in terms of redline skills all of these are. So it just allows you so much variety that I really love the faction. It just come up with a strategy, for instance, having the caudal units here to you know, hide all the infantry, or hide just the horned ones or the feral carnosaurs to give them a nasty surprise. That sort of idea is always nice for you to, you know, to ensure that you get some different ways of playing the faction while you're fighting your enemies. So just like Mazda Mundi, the faction feels very simplified. Contrary to Mazda, however, Kroq-Gar actually feels like the basic Lizardmen experience. I would definitely recommend it, especially because of somewhat easier location, I would say. Your armies are really powerful. Once you realize your mobile artillery and missiles that are actually good in combat too, you'll be surprised of the amount of staying power and damage potential that they have. It is difficult to get used to all the buildings and all the different combinations that you can have, so that is a slightly different one. You have to plan out. That's what I would recommend. Then you have a few different army compositions, and you can fully have a grasp on the overall faction. The army does consist of good infantry, good skirmishers, good cavalry and flyers, good monstrous infantry, great and a vast array of single entities, so good. Lacks typical artillery, by the way, and does lack some range overall. Now, replenishments is average. This is mostly due to climate issues. I believe now, still, it is time to fight with the last defender of Shotul, Mr. Kroq-Gar of the Lizardmen.